So welcome back to my channel, Bob's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on the 1951 Harley. What's been happening lately is I've been having a little bit of chatter in the clutch. I put a new clutch hub in, so I think I know what the problem is. I suspect what I'm going to find is there's a bit of grease that's come off the hub bearings that have probably got into the clutch, and it's probably got it a little bit contaminated, so I'll have to soak those. I suspect I probably should have cleaned up the discs between the clutches as well. I'd sand them lightly, but I think I probably needed something a little bit more aggressive to take some of the glazing off. So we're going to take it apart. Going to find out. Now this one's got a belt drive. It doesn't have the original chain. And it's got a bit of a mix of original and aftermarket parts in there. So I don't expect to see too many surprises in this. The seal looked good last time I looked at it, although on the engine there's a little bit of weepage on the front of the front seal on the motor. But we'll take it apart and see what we find out. So I hope you enjoy this, and thanks for watching. Well guys, I was going to be working on servicing the clutch today, but I came out and I found a new surprise. So it looks like we get to service the clutch and put a new seal in at the same time. So sit back and let's see what we find. Okay, so pretty straightforward to get off. Get the primary drive cover off. All we have to do is take off a couple bolts, get the floorboard off, and it's good to go. Okay, a couple bolts, a couple 9/16 nuts, I should say, to take off the floorboard, and that's it. Didn't bother filming that because pretty simple. And now I'll start getting into the removal of the primary cowl. So, sorry about turning the camera on and off all the time, but I had to go find where I put the tools from the last time I did this. So you've probably seen the clutch and remove the clutch 100 different other videos. I think the most common thing you see is a spring, valve spring retainer to hold this all together. I don't have one of those, so I just use washers. A couple of these, and I use the adjusting nut here to drive it in. Works just as well. So this nut is the preload adjustment for the clutch rod. So I'll take this all the way out. This is the jam nut for it. And this is the clutch, so you can see lots of that. Turn that back in, and you'll see this start to move back there. And then this is the lock nut. So what I just simply do is use the adjust nut here, or just screw, put the lock nut on, and this will allow me to take off these screws here, and the whole clutch assembly will come out as a piece. And there you go. That'll hold that whole assembly together. that adjusting screw is right there. So I had this apart because I put a new clutch hub in there, so things should be pretty new. The only thing I wasn't sure of whether or not I scuffed up the plates enough. So I got a pretty bright light on so you can see up inside the clutch. So it's a series of frictional plates and steel plates. And so again, the first thing that got me started in this was I had an oil leak. So a couple of places it could come out from is from this push rod seal right here. I replaced that, and frankly, if it did, you would see all kinds of transmission oil in this area, and it looks pretty dry. The clutches on the outside anyways look pretty dry as well, so that doesn't seem very likely. So I'm going to go through these and take a look. I had a chattering problem. I'm pretty sure I knew what the issue was. But I'm going to go through and take a look at the individual plates and see if I can find any problems with them, and then we'll get on to the next step. So pick makes this a little bit easier. Just going to take a look at each. I keep them in order. It doesn't really matter. They're all the same, but I keep them in order. And I'm just looking for any indication of cracks or any problems there. And as when I put this back together with the new clutch hub the last time, I cleaned all the surfaces with isopropyl alcohol, and I took a very light scuff pad to clean up the surfaces. These look pretty good, so I was wondering if there's still some if there was some charring or burnishing or scoring on the outside, but they all look good. If you notice in the steel plates, you'll see there's an out, and you'll see this little spring cushion. It's just a bit of a damper, shock absorber for the clutch. When putting them back together, they alternate back and forth because this is wide. They'd interfere, so you'll get them alternate back and forth when you put them in stagger and have the outside out, of course. So I'm not seeing any indication of any problem. I'm not seeing any indication of there being any oil at this point. So that kind of certainly makes it look like there's no real problem with the leaks from that seal. A little bit more debris here, but not too bad. This one's a little bit different material, but still looks okay. So this one, it would be one, all of them I'm going to clean back up with rubbing alcohol, but it doesn't look wet at all. And this one looks good as well. So I'm not really seeing any problem here yet. Kind of greasy in the back. Oh, and there you can see the problem there. So this is starting to get wet. You can see the grease here. So that's basically me when I put the clutch hub back in, I put too much grease on the bearings, and it's worked its way out past the rollers, balls in this case. Yeah, I think this one's balls. The old one was rollers. Well, they're a short roller in a cage, but it's worked its way up and it's got back on the first face of the clutch. So if it's happened here, it's likely happened on the back of the hub as well, where there's another clutch. So I'm going to get this bolt off. So this bolt, this push rod, holds the clutch. Well, actually, the whole thing will slide out now. That holds the hub on, but this just slides over top the wheel, so I can pull this forward. But you can also check too for these fingers. Got grease on them. That's me again. I put a little bit on there, but there's no indentations. I can see a mark from the clutches. So I'm going to run a little, probably Scotch-Brite over top, but really nothing to speak of. But like I said, this grease is probably the reason I originally had my chatter. So let's just see if we can get lucky and slide this out without taking the clutch. Yeah, looks like that's going out. All right. A little bit of wiggling back and forth. Wait, I think I mentioned this is a reverse thread, and the motor is the right-hand thread. So left-hand thread, and then the motor being the right-hand thread. And I guess that's intended so that any torques on the motor and the transmission is going to tend to tighten things up. I'm going to wiggle this a little bit further, see if I can get it out. The easiest way of doing this, of course, is take the motor nut off, which I'm getting pretty close to thinking I'm going to have to do. But I think I'll get that. So I'm just going to, a little change of plans, I'm just going to get a wrench on here. There's some tabs across there, and I'm going to slide the whole assembly off. Okay, I'm going to bend up those tabs out of the way. I already have bent them up, I should say. And then I'm going to take this lock nut off, or this nut off for the clutch hub, and I'm going to pull the whole assembly out. A little bit easier when you do that because of the taper end. You can sort of loosen off the belt at the same time. But I'm going to probably wind up to take the motor pulley off at the same time anyways, but let's get it started. So right hand, left hand thread. So okay guys, sorry I had to get some nuts, and I had to get some another battery for the GoPro. So pretty straightforward. Now use the nuts from the 3 fingers of this 3-finger clutch, and all I'm going to do is snug this bolt up just a little on the puller, and then just give it a little tap on the end. It didn't take much the last time I did this. You don't need a lot of pressure. So get snug. Try a rubber mallet, but the metal one's actually better. Nope, that didn't work. Try the metal hammer. Okay, just got to do the pressure and then a tap. And I'm not working here. I wonder if I got the nut down too tight. Yeah, I suspect that's the problem. So what I think happened is when I was tightening down the puller, it wound up tightening the lock nut as well for the hub. So let's see if that works. Well, I wish I had captured that on film. I was just retightening these bolts and it just popped off. All it was is the nut for the hub was just too far in.
so I couldn't get it loose. And all it took was literally just snugging up these nuts a little bit, and it popped off. A little bit anticlimactic. I wish I really got that on film. And then spin this off. This is a little bit of a tricky part. You know, not going to bother taking over the or taking off the pulley off the engine. Just going to do it here, or from this side. It's not too bad to do it on this with the belt drive. If there's a chain drive, it might be something a bit different. Try to keep everything together there. And then there's the back side. A little bit of rust starting to form. That actually looks surprisingly dry there too. I'll clean that up on there. Everything else here looks good, other than you can see grease is really bad there. So that's something I'm going to have to address. That's the hub. You can see what was happening here though. You know, put too much grease in, and you can see it's all gummed up. So that's what started the chattering. But the problem I've got is the oil leak. So you can see oil down there. You can see some there, around there. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be the issue. Now what's going to have to happen, wish I could tell that for sure though, but yeah, it does look like that's the problem, because I got no real sign of any oil from behind. So I suspect, and that sprocket looks very wet, and you can see that nut looks very wet. So that means, I was pretty sure of it, but that means that primary has got to come off as well. And then take the inner primary off, take the sprocket off, and then I can get at the seal. And that will require a puller to get that sprocket off as well. Okay, same for this now. Oh, and that's coming off real easy. I had to take a look to see if this was supposed to have a lock washer as well. I suspect it is. Now there's a keyway in here. Let's take a look at that. Nope, on this one. In a hex shape, that's the insert for the pulley. Everything seems fairly dry up front there. I'm a little bit surprised there's no lock washer on this. And then next after that is take off the inner primary cover. Lots of washers. So one more nut and bolt left up around the clutch. I mean the chain guard, and that's gonna need a little bit of a wrench to get in the back to the lock nut in the back. looks like I got a bit of degreasing to do in this as well. So I'm kind of interested to see what's going to happen when I get the sprocket off. I think this is more of the original styles. I've seen that there are nuts on, sprocket nuts, that have an internal seal on them. This doesn't look like that's one of them. Looks like more of the original design. That's good and it's bad. Almost there. This nut's not going too well. It's binding up a bit. We'll get it out. See what's wrong with it. Looks like a nylock nut on the back. My guess is it's galled up with the road debris and oil. We'll find out in a second. There we go. A little bit of cleanup needed there. Okay, I gotta go find out where that nut went. Probably dropped somewhere in me. Oh, there it is. There. Try to keep all hardware all grouped up together, so everything's back in its place. I still got one washer. There we go. One washer stuck on this. That's gonna stay there for a bit. Pretty boring video, but it's fun to watch people struggle. Now, I've always had just a little bit of a drip from the input shaft, but like I said, this obviously something went wrong real quick. Don't know what causes it. I know the grease that was in the clutch that was making it chatter was also making it drag. So I'd shift every now and then, and the clutch wouldn't release, or wouldn't engage, or wouldn't release. It was just probably sliding on the fingers. I'm not sliding on the fingers, I should say. So that's not too much of an issue. Just I shook the bike as gently as I can, but I did one of my last drives actually hit a second when I was gearing down. It was a bit of a hard shift, so I get a feeling that might have been enough to do it, or it could just be the amount of riding I'm doing on the bike lately got it a little bit worse. So got that nut out. No washers on that one for whatever reason. And oh, there we are. Boy, that is a mess. I got some cleanup to do. I'll get some brake cleaned out and clean out all this. Oh, there's another washer. Because this is one big mess. Okay. I got it flashed out. We can take a look. It's the first time I've had this cover off since I got the bike. Okay, so you can see it's all pretty wet behind there. Now I do get some seepage from that inspection plug for the engine, so there's a little bit of oil coming from there, but you can see it's pretty wet back here. So my suspicion is that behind that sprocket, we're going to find the problem. You can see the oil right here, pretty wet, very wet. So I got some cleanup to do. I'm going to take off this sprocket nut as well, see if I can get that off, and take a look behind there, see if I can see any other problems as well. So one thing I'm going to take a look for, I think what I'm going to do before I start ripping things apart, just in case it's coming from the push rod tube, once I get the sprocket off, I'm just taking a look for cracks. I can see right here, though, I'm pretty confident by how wet this is right here, that it's the main seal back there, because it's, you can see drips all behind. The whole area back here is wet, so I'm pretty confident that's going to be the issue. And from the puddle that's on the, it's on the floor right here now, it looks like it's coming from behind. I was just taking a look to make sure the case is okay. Just for information, this is actually a 1947. There's a date code in the bottom. It's 1947 four-speed transmission, so it's a, you know, the last of the Panheads. It's also got a Panhead distributor, which I showed you in one of my other videos. Like I said, once I get the sprocket off, I can take the chain off. There's the kingpin right there. I'm going to set it in its normal rest position, and I'm going to put the cap back on this, and the push rod, or the clutch plunger, and the seal, just to make sure it's coming from the back seal, which I'm almost 99% sure, because I would have had oil all over the front of the clutch hub, and I didn't. It would have been wet on the outside, so I'm 99% sure. But before I start ripping things apart, I'd like to double check and see if that makes a difference.
We can see it's been a while, and the motorcycle's no longer in the garage. It's actually in my basement. This is where I keep it in the bar area when in the wintertime. And you'll probably notice it's all back together. So I got the all the drivetrain, all the primary drive, all taken apart. And what I decided to do just before I went and tore the seal out is I took out all the transmission fluid out of the transmission. Again, it's a 1947, I think I've said Panhead in the video, but it's a knucklehead transmission. 48 was the first year of the Panhead, so it's date coded as a 47. So before I rip into the seal, I decided I'm just going to top up with oil and see if I can see where the leak's coming from. Well, I did, sat it in the garage for about a week or two, probably 2 weeks. Kept an eye on it to see what was happening, and I didn't get a leak back. So it got me thinking a little bit. I did a little bit of research and took a look at the transmission, and I bought, for the transmission, I bought a transmission oil. But when I started looking at the original literature for the Panhead and started checking a couple of different forums for that vintage Panhead and the knucklehead Panhead and even the shovelhead, all use basically the same transmission, and it's supposed to actually use engine oil in the transmission. So it typically is about the equivalent of about a 50 weight oil in the transmission. Clearly the stuff that I put in, I haven't got the container, but it doesn't matter, because I don't want to embarrass anybody, because it's mainly my own embarrassment. clearly the oil in the container that I got was a much thinner viscosity than the stuff that's supposed to go in there. The 50 weight oil is really thick. When it's cold, it's frankly like pours like syrup. So I think that's what the problem was. So I won't get much of a chance. It's been sitting. I frankly overfilled it, and it's been sitting in with a little paper towel underneath this to catch anything. And there hasn't been a drip. There hasn't been a drip, and it's been a month now. So the bike's going to sit in here. It's kind of an unusual spot, but precious space in my garage. I can't afford to have it. Not to mention, the humidity in my garage up in the northeast area, it tends to get a bit of a problem. So I'm going to do a little bit of other work. It's temporarily put back together, tighten things up, but I really would like to go through it again. I did find, after all that work, I'm sure that the chattering I got when I was engaging the clutch was that grease that had seeped out of the clutch hub. So it's cleaned up. I used solvents, primarily rubbing alcohol. Cleaned it a little bit with a bit of solvent, and then came at it with rubbing alcohol. Went through all the plates, but it was really the first friction disc in the back of the clutch, the hub itself, where the first friction material is. It was just completely coated. Fingers were fine. That's another thing. You can get little burrs in the fingers, and that'll hold the clutches from moving. All that was good. When I first put that clutch in, it worked perfectly. And I only put on maybe 300-400 miles on it before that came back. So I think that's what the problem is. I don't think I really have a problem with the seal now that they got a thicker viscosity oil in there. I'm going to keep watching it. I will probably bring a part 2 to this video. Well, I'll take it apart in either sometime through the winter in the basement, which my wife always hates, or I will do it first thing in the spring. I've got to do a few other things. I still have to get the new the new 49 handlebars mounted, and I got to fix that seat, and I got a few little touch-ups I got to do here and there. I want to get off the oil cooler. I don't think that's really helping me a whole lot, and I want to I bought a more original an exhaust system. I want to try that out, and I want to replumb some of my oil lines. This braided oil hose going up this oil cooler, I think, is more restrictive than it is actually helping with cooling, and to try to deal with some other issues I got that I'll talk about in a further video. And the other thing I'm going to be doing is the rear bearing. I've got clearance in there, so I'm going to be ordering a new bearing set and axle shaft and changing that out. It's pretty straightforward, but I'll walk you through it, and I'll give you an opportunity to take a look at the rear brakes as well. So unfortunately, I'm ending this video with not actually completing anything, but potentially of identifying a problem. At least you got to see the inside, got to see the clutch, got to see the grease, and the care you got to take in making sure you don't get too much grease in there, which if you look at other people's videos on the trend on doing the same type of work, you'll hear them say that, don't put too much grease in there. And other than that, I'll check it out in the spring again, and do a follow-up on that after I again recheck and retorque everything, make sure I put it all back to quickly. I had to get it out fairly quick, and I just basically packaged up enough so I can get it stored into the wintertime. So keep an eye out for a part 2 video, which I'll go into more detail, and we'll keep an eye out for some other videos where I'm going to do some other upgrades and repairs on the bike as well. Thanks for watching again.